the bigger thing for me is just how special it is for the students. And I think that's something I love to highlight. Not a single member of our team had been to Boston or even been to the East Coast at all. None of them had even been remotely over there. So they're getting an opportunity, number one, to fly across the nation for a video game that they play. Number two, they're representing their school while doing it. And number three, they get to go to a national tournament, something they never would have imagined they get to do. And they won scholarship money for it. So I think the experiences that it gives the students are, they're going to remember this the rest of their lives. Something they'll never forget. They'll tell their kids about, I won a championship when I was in college. So I think the impact it has on the students' lives is what I love to highlight because I think it's just so special for them.
Hello, and welcome to More Than Sunday, a weekly podcast where we take a deeper dive into the stories, themes, and questions of our faith. My name is Eric Chakowski. I'm one of the worship directors here at First United Methodist Church Richardson, and back with me this week is one of our associate pastors, Josh Fitzpatrick.
It's good to be back. Good to see you, Eric.
Yeah, good to have you back.
So I'm just going to jump right to it. One of the fun things about Season 3 of this podcast is to see how it has evolved over the course of its life. So Season 1, we interviewed a lot of people within our church family. Season 2, we expanded it to a more national audience and we're able to remote in a lot of guests. And then Season 3, one of our goals has been to highlight different pockets or communities within our own backyard here in Richardson. So we've been able to interview Dr. Jeannie Stone from RISD, local veterinarians. Last week from UTD, we had Dr. Michael Kilgard. It's been just so neat to see the variety of stories that we've been able to tell and to have told to us, which leads me to this week's interview. Let me just set this up by saying after our conversation with Dr. Michael Kilgard, I was speaking with somebody in the communications department at the University of Texas at Dallas and just asking them where the energy on campus is. And he told me, if you're going to tell any story, you need to tell the story of what's happening in our esports department with our esports team. And I'm just going to show my hand and say, esport? What's esports? And so he began to explain to me that esports is basically formalized gaming, and we're going to hear more about it in just a second. But it was a world that I had absolutely no frame of reference for, and I'm really looking forward to today's conversation.
Now, Josh and I actually recently were able to go on their campus and see their esports facility where they practice and do some of the gaming and meet our guest for today and have a little bit of pre-conversation with him about a few things. It was really exciting for me, so I'll show my hand too a little bit. I know a little bit about gaming, but mostly because growing up, I had an older brother who was really into gaming himself, and as many younger brothers do in wanting to hang out with their older brothers, older siblings, and friends, I sort of did what they did. And so I was sort of exposed to some of these games at a younger age and even a little bit older from time to time when I find a little pocket of time here and there. I enjoy playing a video game now and again. So excited about this conversation today. We are thrilled to welcome Greg Adler.
Today's podcast, we are thrilled to be able to invite the coach of the esports team at the University of Texas at Dallas. His name is Greg Adler. Greg, it's great to have you today.
Hey, thanks for having me, guys. I'm really glad to be here.
So for those of our listeners who aren't as familiar with esports as we are, I'll be honest, I'm not as familiar with esports as well. So for me and for those listeners who aren't, would you mind filling us in a bit on just the history of the sport and how it has grown into what it is today?
Sure, no problem. So at its core, esports is essentially competitive gaming. And it's essentially taking any video game that exists and trying to compete against others to the highest levels. Really, it started with, old games like Donkey Kong and Mario and Tetris and just, seeing who among their friend groups was the best. Everyone was like, oh, I'm so good at this game. But then when you really put the competition aspect, how do you stack up against everybody else? So now esports, obviously starting as just competitive video games, has really evolved as a scene overall. So now there's specific games out there that are made to be esports that are more competitive rather than casual. There are leagues around it and things like that. But at its core, it's essentially just competitive video gaming.
In the past, how many years has it really come to fruition?
I'd say past 5 to 6 years, it's really started to become more mainstream.
Okay.
But really, it's been around for about 20, 30 years at this point. Obviously a little more underground on lower levels. But, games like Super Smash Bros. That came out for the N64 was a pretty big game that people played. And that was about 91, 92 that came out. So it's existed for a while, but really the last 5 to 6 years it's picked up a lot.
Now, do you feel like anything like the monetization of YouTube videos and those sorts of things have contributed to the rise of gaming, or how do you feel like some of that plays into it?
I think that's definitely impact, but I think the overall bigger idea is just the more digital and streaming-based lives we live in now, because essentially any of these games you can just go online and watch at any time that you want. So, for a lot of people, as an example, if you have a game that you play and you want to get competitive in it, well, how do you get good at something? You watch the pros, you watch those that are the best at it. So with these games, you have the opportunity to go online and watch these best players in the entire world play and learn from them and talk to them. So having that actively available as a resource, improves the scene as a whole.
Gotcha. So tell us about your own journey. Have you always been a big gamer, or is this something sort of recent for you, or how'd you get into this?
Yeah, I've definitely been a gamer my whole life. I grew up playing, Super Nintendo, SNES with my dad and all those. But really the big thing for me is I'm also a big traditional sports guy. So I love the competition aspect of it. So, ever since I've been really young, I've always been, challenging my siblings, challenging all my cousins, all my friends in the games that I play. I love being able to see how far I can push, not only my ability, but, the ones that I play against and where I stack up against them. So I've definitely been gaming my whole life. But, esports is kind of just that passion for me. It's that opportunity to see these games at the highest possible level and to really be the one instructing them.
So you moved from an amateur gamer to now being the coach of an esports team. How did you make that transition?
So the big thing for me is I got my degree in music education, my Bachelor of Science from Kutztown University in Pennsylvania. And I was a music teacher there for about 2 to 3 years. And the big connection for me was, being able to have my passion of esports on the side, something I followed pretty frequently. I watched all the teams, watched all the pros, and then to combine that with my teaching techniques, use what I do in the classroom, is kind of a perfect coaching fit in that sense. But the nice part about collegiate esports is it's so new. So it's really based on the individual and what they want to do with the program and how they want to mold it. And so this kind of position, having the already experience in a classroom, the experience with the school settings, and then with my experience just online esports was kind of a perfect fit.
And tell us a little bit more about the program itself at UTD. How old is it and how did it come to be?
Sure. So we just started our second year on August 26th. We are a varsity esports program, which means we are officially recognized by the university. I am the staff member, the sole staff member of the program. We are housed under the athletics department, so we're treated like any other sport would be within the department. We currently have 3 games that we offer: League of Legends, Overwatch, and Smash Bros. Ultimate. And we have 5 teams across that. So 2 for League of Legends, 2 for Overwatch, and 1 for Smash Bros. So it's about 35 students in total that participate on the teams.
Now, you mentioned overall it's a varsity sport, but it is a little bit different than some of the other varsity sports in that it's not recognized by the NCAA. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct. And especially for us, which is unique, is that our athletic department is Division III. We are the second largest Division III school in the nation. And if we moved to Division II, we'd be the largest. But we are Division III. So that means with esports, we're actually essentially Division I in the sense that we play against teams all over the nation that are highly ranked. Our athletic department and our teams primarily play against, regional opponents and stuff like that. But we play against University of Central Florida, UCLA, NYU, Boston University. So schools all over the country, and we get to do that, through our athletic department.
Tell me a little bit about the team dynamic. First of all, how do you get onto the esports team?
Sure. So we have a tryout process like it would be for any other sport or any other game. The nice part about esports is each game essentially has an online ranking system within the game. So you're able to kind of go online, see stats about these players, see information about them, and then kind of set requirements based on those stats for your tryouts.
Okay.
So each game has certain levels that you have to be at a minimum in order to try out. But then, we look for important things like communication, teamwork, how does your mentality stay when you have a tough loss, things like that. Very similar to regular sports in that sense. There's a lot of comparisons between the two.
And so then when it comes to the tournament setting, how does the team compete against other teams? What does that look like, and how often do you compete?
Sure. So the interesting thing about collegiate esports is that the developers of the games are the ones that run their leagues. Most of these leagues exist in the spring season, and their general format is that you essentially play a regular season all online, and then at the conclusion of the regular season, based on playoff results, the top 8 teams, they'll fly out to a specific Pacific region. For League of Legends, it's their headquarters in Los Angeles. And then for Overwatch, it was Houston for their tournament. So it's essentially online qualifiers to an in-person tournament. But the nice thing about esports is there's tournaments year-round. And the cool part for us especially is that we can compete in semi-professional tournaments because the players on our teams are high enough ranked that they're able to kind of keep up with these teams. So we frequently do semi-professional tournaments, random one-day tournaments here and there. There's a esports stadium in Arlington. They host weekly events, so sometimes we'll go to those. But really the big thing is just the culmination of the season in the spring followed by the postseason afterwards.
And I want to clarify one comment I made a little bit earlier. So you mentioned that the developers of the games are the ones who run the leagues and the tournaments. Is that the main reason that the NCAA has not gotten on board with something that universities have now recognized as legitimate sports?
I'm not sure if that's the main reason, but it's definitely a big reason. I think there's a lot more that goes into it. A lot of these players are streaming on the side, so they wouldn't be able to do that with the NCAA. You're not allowed to make money off of your sport, essentially. There's a lot of sponsors.
That's big news right now that they're talking about in other sports, right? Yeah.
Right. And I think the NCAA just sees too many risks right now in it. It's kind of like unwalked territory, essentially, and they're kind of being careful, and they don't really want to jump into it without having an essential kind of platform to go off of.
So a lot of times with extracurricular activities, I'm sure at schools, folks might be worried about distraction from classroom. And then maybe there's even an extra stigma around video games. What do you say to people who maybe are skeptical or feel like video games are a distraction from what kids are at school to do?
Well, I think the overall biggest thing is everything in moderation. You wouldn't want to spend too much time on school that you have no social life. You wouldn't want to spend too much time on any sport that your school is lacking. So I think a lot of it is about time management and just addressing what are your priorities. For all the students that are on our teams, esports is a passion of theirs. Video games are just something they've done their whole life. They've always been competitive about it. But they know that they're at UT Dallas for that degree. They know they're at there for school. So, being in a program like that and being in a team environment like that and having the instruction kind of helps promote that time management. You learn those skills. You learn, when you need to get studying done, when you need to focus on your games and things like that. So I think the overall thing is whatever you want to do, just having time management skills and setting up your priorities accordingly is the most important thing.
Well, and to your comment earlier, how you talked about, the analyzation of the game and the way that you coach the sport and those sorts of things, I would imagine there are similar sorts of life skills, identifying strengths and weaknesses, teamwork, those sorts of things that surface from being a member of the esports team.
Oh, yeah. And I mean, even just to break it down to just a general gaming level, we had summer camps this past summer, which was essentially esports summer camps. But the real big sell for us was that, members of the community, kids of the community could come in and play games with other kids. And so I talked to so many parents that are like, look, I'm just glad to see him getting the in-person interaction with the video games. He plays online with his friends all the time, but getting that social interaction, getting to meet with people and, new people they've never met before. And they meet and immediately click because they have that same passion of gaming already and they know it. So, to talk to those parents and to hear them say that they love to just see their child getting that interaction and getting that exposure is really great.
That is too cool. So I'm just fascinated by this entire concept. Going back to me trying to imagine what it looks like to be at a tournament, your team flies to Boston, goes to a tournament, and you're the coach. So what does that look like at a tournament? What does the coaching role look like?
So it really depends on the game. But overall, essentially a lot of prep beforehand, because the interesting thing is when you're actually in the matches, usually you don't have much time to talk to the teams. It's usually like in between games or in between full matches. So it's really on them to kind of know what's up and if there's a problem to try to self-assess it. So a lot of it is prep, just making sure their mentality is there, keeping focus, what we're supposed to be doing and stuff like that. And definitely a lot of scouting. For a lot of these tournaments, they're very last minute. So you don't really know any of the opponents till you get there. So you get there and the whole time I'm like, okay, what is this team doing? What's this team doing? How good is this guy? And I'm using all that information to kind of help prep our team for the matches coming up.
Just like scouting any other team sport.
Right. And so are you reviewing past tournaments and actually watching film, if you will, and critiquing that?
Yeah, definitely. So I'll give a specific game example here. So we just won the national championship with Smash Brothers Ultimate.
Which congratulations.
Thank you very
That's
much.
huge.
Thank you. It definitely felt great. But it's essentially a fighting game which is based on the Nintendo characters. So Mario's in it, Bowser, Peach, Donkey Kong, all these characters are in it. And we went to the tournament, and the one thing that gave us a distinct advantage over the other teams and that they noted gave us an advantage was that we knew all of the characters they were going to play. We knew all their play styles. We had videos on all of them.
Wow.
We knew when they were going to pick and why they were going to pick it. And so we were so prepared. And so every match we knew exactly what we were going to do, and none of the other teams had that preparation. And so that makes a really big difference. The more information you have to go into the match or to any event, the more comfortable and the more, you can just focus on your pure mechanics.
So tell us about the experience of actually winning the national champion. I mean, you talked earlier about playing schools like UCLA and, I mean, big, what would be considered D1 schools. I have to imagine that was a pretty neat experience for you guys.
Yeah, it was pretty incredible, especially because we just started our program in our first year. So to be able to just have that much success just really means a lot. But I think the bigger thing for me is just how special it is for the students. And I think that's something I love to highlight. Not a single member of our team had been to Boston or even been to the East Coast at all. None of them had even been remotely over there. So they're getting an opportunity, number one, to fly across the nation for a video game that they play. Number two, they're representing their school while doing it. And number three, they get to go to a national tournament, something they never would have imagined they get to do. And they won scholarship money for it. So I think the experiences that it gives the students are, they're going to remember this the rest of their lives, something they'll never forget. They'll tell their kids about, I won a championship when I was in college. So I think the impact it has on the students' lives is what I love to highlight because I think it's just so special for them.
And what about also the impact it has on the school? Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. So I say it all the time, but our campus is a very self-proclaimed nerd school. So, to add esports is something that really just fits into the heart of campus. But I mean, people just love it and they eat it up like crazy. Last year, we hosted a Smash Bros. Tournament on our campus for students only, just to kind of get some engagement going. And we wanted to cap it at 100 people. Well, we had 100 people signed up in the first day. So we were like, okay, maybe next time we'll increase it here a bit just to make sure it's running. And I think a lot of that is they just love to see UT Dallas, supporting their passion. It's pretty cool to see your school supporting the games that you've been playing your whole life and to be like, we recognize what you love and we want you to do it representing our school.
Well, and you guys got some media attention as well for the championship and some other things. Is that right?
Oh, yeah. We were on CBS. We were on Fox, the local stations. But it's technically the first championship within the athletic department ever for the school.
Wow.
So
that's pretty incredible.
Awesome.
Yeah. So, and the cool part about it is just like you said, we beat UCF, we beat University of South Carolina, we beat UC Irvine, New Jersey Institute of Technology, like some pretty big schools to get there. It wasn't an easy path at all. And so, I think that just makes it that much more special.
Putting the Comets on the map.
That's it.
I love it. So then from here, where do you see the program going? What are some goals you have?
So one big goal, and this is just something for college esports in general, is really connecting the scholastic aspects to the esports aspects.
Okay.
So a lot of our students that are part of our program aren't on the teams themselves, but they're graphic designers, they're marketing majors, they're production majors. So they're using their experiences and what they're learning in classes to help apply it to esports. As an example, we have a couple of students that their main jobs is they're shoutcasters. So they'll commentate the matches and then they'll build a portfolio off of that. Yeah. And they go back and watch the matches and analyze themselves and things like that. So we really want it to be an all-encompassing program and not just the competitive aspect. How can we get as many students involved doing the things they're learning in classes with esports?
It sounds like those are creating some new opportunities for students to really integrate their skills in. What other benefits do you feel like to the university for exposure for new students do you feel like having an esports team would give?
Well, I think there's a ton of benefits. A couple of the biggest ones are like what I mentioned before. Your university essentially saying this passion that you have is validated and we want to encourage it. I think that's the biggest thing because they recognize that their university is listening to what they want and what they care about and, giving them that support. So I think that's the big thing. But I think the second thing is it gives you school spirit. For a lot of these students that go to our campus, they're not usually going to watch sports games. They may go to games here and there, but the general population is going to stay in their dorm room, playing video games or watching TV or whatnot. So now they get to see their school represented on a national level in a digital media world. So they get to watch them and support them, join in chat and say things like that. I like to tell people when we went to Boston for the championship, it was all streamed online. And part of the streaming online is there's like an active chat that you can talk in. And the entire chat is just UTD people saying like, whoosh, like, let's go Comets. And it's just so spamming it like crazy. So, they feel that real connection to that. And you're able to kind of get that, D1 football school experience through your esports team.
And digitally, it seems like an outside critic would claim that video games would be so isolating, and yet modern technology has just kind of flipped the script so that what you're telling me is that it's bringing people together in kind of this digital space in brand new ways.
Right. And that's kind of the biggest benefit about esports is you don't need to necessarily be a certain height, you don't need to be a certain weight. It's all about who's better, who's put more time in, who has the experience, and you can play all over the world. We've played teams in China before. We've played teams in Mexico. Just through this online service.
Well, in addition to that, there's a whole new group of gaming celebrities. I mean, Ninja and several others. I mean, he's probably one of the bigger names out there, but I've seen him in Samsung commercials and all these other things that these professional gamers are out there. And it is actually now a way to make a living for a number of people, either through tournament winnings or, as I mentioned earlier, monetizing videos that gamers are watching. Do you see folks from your teams going into professional gaming themselves? How do you see that industry evolving?
So the interesting thing about professional gaming comparatively to collegiate is it's not the same path as it would be for another sport. So as an example, just to say football, you're in high school, you get recruited by a college, you go there for 3 to 4 years, and then you go to the NFL draft and you're in the NFL. But with esports, if you're good enough to go pro, you just go pro when you're 18. Usually you don't go through the college process. Usually it's about 18 to 24 is the esport athlete range. But the unique part about it is that you're getting experiences that are similar to a professional level. So you're getting to go to these tournaments, compete against these teams, but off of that, you're just getting general esports experience. So you're getting to see what a program is like, what are the things involved, what are the positions involved, how do you run a team. So I don't necessarily see them ever going into a pro situation, although they may. I don't necessarily see that happening, but I think I could see a lot of them going into just general esports positions because of this experience, whether it be coaching a college team, running a team as a professional level, or whatever it may be. I think using this experience will help them a lot.
What kind of impact has being the coach of the esports team at UTD had on your own life?
Oh, man, it is pretty incredible. Sometimes I just sit down and look back at the years, because like I said, I was a music teacher before this. And if I had told my parents or any of my friends that I was going to be an esports coach in 2 years, they just would have laughed at me. Been like, what are you serious? But I think the big thing is that, especially for my family, and my friends are all big video games players, but my family is not necessarily into it. But my dad came down and visited and was like, this is insane. This is awesome. This is definitely a perfect fit for you. And he kind of really recognized it for him. And, he watches our matches and things like that. I have my sisters, they watch the matches. So I think, it kind of takes the thing I've been passionate about my whole entire life. And it's been all this time I put into it, look where it's kind of turned out to be. And so it kind of, puts it into perspective a little bit.
I think one of the greatest gifts for any of us is finding the combination of our passions, gifts, and talents, and being able to turn them into something that we can make a living doing, that we love to do, and that clearly is impacting. I mean, your comment earlier about the impact that it has on the students' lives, creating memories, developing skills, those sorts of things. It's so neat to be able to, take your education background and continue to live into that.
Yeah, and again, I think just overall, giving these students these opportunities is what really makes it worth for me. I'll give another example. Our League of Legends team last year, they made the playoffs. And by making the playoffs, each student on the team gets $1,000 in scholarship money. And while it may not seem like much, one of the students on our team literally started crying after we won the match.
Wow.
Because he was paying for all of his school, he pays for all of his books, all of his housing and everything. And to just be able to get some help at all to go to his school, is life-changing.
Wow.
As someone who isn't as versed in esports and maybe an outsider just wanted to maybe dip my toe in the water, where would you recommend I go to experience esports?
I would say the biggest thing is you could just search esports tournaments on Google and honestly just find any of the things. But I think a better tool would be to go to Twitch, twitch.tv. And that's the big streaming service. So I would go there or even YouTube and just search things. Look what people are doing. Because if you go to those platforms, you can see tons of people just playing games there and just go check it out. But really at a base level, if you just search esports tournaments on Google, the first 5 results will be the biggest tournaments ever. And you can kind of get a spectrum of what it's all about.
And more specifically, if we wanted to support the esports team at UTD or find out more information about that, where can we find out info about you guys?
So if you want to support the team, head on over to utdesports.com. We're also on all social media platforms, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, all that. We're very big with social media. We have a lot of digital presence there. Our athletics website has a big esports section there, which is just at our utdallas.edu website. So check that out.
So, Greg, it has been awesome to have you today. I personally played video games quite a bit growing up. My brother is really the bigger gamer in the family, and he's my older brother, and so it was a lot of times me wanting to hang out with my older brother and his friends, and so I would kind of slide into what they were doing. But this has been a fascinating conversation for me, so I appreciate that. We have one question that we ask everyone on the podcast, and that question is this. Up until this point in your life, what's one thing that you wish someone would have told you?
I think one thing that would have really made my life a big difference is just, it's essentially just do it. We live in kind of a world right now where we have a lot of idea people that are like, oh, we could do this, we could do this, we could do this, we could do this. But who's actually going to do it? Who's the person that's going to be like, I'm going to put the work in, I'm going to step up, and I'm actually going to do it. So like if you have an idea, just go for it. Whatever it may take. If it takes the work, if it takes, like with esports, I was a music teacher. Esports was totally my side gig. I wasn't making money off of it until this position, but I just went for it. And I was like, what have I got to lose here? I just got to put everything into it and give it a shot. So I say, if you have something you want to do and you have an idea, just do whatever you can and just get it done.
I love that. I think you guys are a embodied metaphor of that at UTD, of just having an idea and you guys are making it happen.
Thank you very much.
The team has come to fruition. It's the new buzz on campus and in our community here in Richardson. And so again, we just really appreciate this conversation. Appreciate you being here today.
Yeah, thank you guys so much for having me. I really appreciate it. I love the podcast. I listen to every one of them. So I really appreciate it.
Thanks.
The way Greg talks about esports brings sort of a new perspective to something that many people might view as just video games, when in reality, it gives people an opportunity to have community, to build skills in areas like strategy and teamwork, interpersonal relationships. I mean, the reality is with the invention of the internet and with these developments of formalized esports leagues, much like traditional sporting teams that we might think of, this gives people an opportunity to work together, build those teamwork skills, and really build skills that will serve them later on in their own lives and even potentially in their careers.
In the church, we often talk about the need to connect with communities that are unlike ourselves. And so we talk about race and ethnicity and even belief systems, but the community of esports is not one that would even be on my radar as far as having a goal to connect with somebody who's different than me. And yet, today's interview has completely opened my eyes to this idea that the world of esports, though I was previously ignorant, is now a community that I can at least say I know better now on this end of the interview than I did on the front end. And so if you are like me or just want more information in general about esports, particularly about the team at University of Texas at Dallas, we invite you to visit our podcast website, which is fumcr.com/morethansunday.
Thank you so much for tuning into this episode of More Than Sunday. If you like the podcast, please feel free to share it, go online and leave a comment, or give us a rating so that others might hear about us. We've got a new episode coming out every Wednesday, so make sure you also subscribe to the podcast on Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts so you don't miss our next episode. If you want to find out more about First United Methodist Church Richardson, you can find us online at fumcr.com, as well as on Facebook and Instagram. Special thanks to Greg Adler for joining us this week, and make sure you tune in next Wednesday. Have a great week.